Hey there, this is Natalie, and ReZero Arc 7 Chapter 14 was released last night, so I'm later than usual with this one. I'd like to say I was busy having a social life where it's Easter weekend, but I'm still on lockdown, so actually my only excuse is that I was deep in a rabbit hole researching something for a video I will be making about Tappei's new anime, Vivi Fluorite's song, so I hope you like that when it comes out, and I'll try to be faster with the next ones. Google Translate says the title of chapter 14 is Values That Are Difficult to Fill, and obviously that's a bit janky, but as always I'm sticking with Google Translate just because it has funnier mistakes than other machine translations. The chapter starts by continuing the conversation around the bonfire in the Sudrak Assembly Hall between Subaru and Vincent. First, it talks about how Subaru feels about Vincent saying he's the Emperor of Wallachia. Subaru has actually never met royalty before because he spent all of his time in Lagunica. He thinks about how strangely well connected he is there, but it doesn't change the strangeness of having run into an emperor in such an unexpected way. Vincent asks if he doubts him, and Subaru says that of course he does, since nobody expects a random man they meet in the woods to turn out to be an emperor. And then because, as he told him before, who can trust a man who doesn't show his face? The scene then compares Subaru and Vincent, who are similar in some ways with their black hair and fierce eyes, but Subaru is Emilia's knight, and Vincent is the emperor of another country. Despite the aura of intimidation that Vincent is known for, Subaru isn't afraid to basically sass him, and this prompts Vincent to start talking about the values of his nation, that the strong must rise and the weak will die to make way for them. He says that becoming emperor was no different. Subaru knows that what he says was true, as he's experienced the values of Wallachian people already with Todd and Jamal. Subaru asks Vincent why he attacked the Imperial soldiers if he's the emperor. Couldn't he just have commanded them? They should all be his subordinates. Vincent says he didn't do that because he's not suicidal. Subaru begins to suspect what Vincent's situation is from this, that he's someone being chased by the current emperor. Vincent says that he's guessed correctly, that the people at the military base were sent to catch him. Subaru says that they'd said they were there to negotiate with the people of Sudrak. He knows he has no way of detecting lies, but at the same time, they were talking about this mission amongst themselves, and it seems unlikely they would be doing all of that just to deceive him and Rem. Vincent talks about the attack on the Imperial base some more, telling Subaru that the decisions that were made, and the dead can't be resurrected. The dead won't speak. This of course makes Subaru think about his ability. It's natural for people to think resurrection is impossible, but Subaru knows better. He could use return by death and return things to a time before the Imperial base was destroyed. He could save all of the people the Sudrak killed for him. But he isn't going to do that. He doesn't even know if it will work, because his save point may have changed. And what chance is there that he will get a better result next time than he and Rem being safe in such a difficult situation? Would he just end up trying endlessly to get even this good of a result again? Vincent looks at him in a way that seems merciful, saying that he's a foolish man with a well-known anguish, that he only looks at others and ignores himself. His pity angers Subaru, even though he managed to say something Subaru understood well, despite not knowing about return by death. Subaru says that he still hasn't answered his question about the Imperial soldiers being after him. Vincent says that it's not the kind of thing they'd tell everybody involved, where it isn't common knowledge that the Emperor has been brought down. Perhaps even the commander didn't know the true reason why they were targeting the Sudrak. But he says targeting the Sudrak was the natural choice for them, as only they would still side with the Emperor in this situation, and killing them would be like cutting off his limbs while he was drowning. Subaru's doubts are starting to clear now, as what Vincent says is fitting with what he heard from Todd. He asks why the Sudrak were the only ones he could rely on. Vincent says that a long time ago, the Emperor of Wallachia saved the Sudrak, and they've never forgotten this. There was also the Bloodlife ritual, which he knew would be his chance to secure them as allies. Subaru thinks about this, thinking it was a bad bet, but Vincent had won it. He says his battle isn't over though, and Vincent says yes, if he dies then it's all over, but he's still alive, so he's going to try to take things back. Subaru asks if he plans to start a war alongside the people of Sudrak, and Vincent says yes. Subaru begins to think about what that's going to mean. In just a few hours, where he'd been unconscious, maybe 100 people had already been killed. Vincent's war would mean many more battles, and many more people dying. He thinks that lives were lost in the battle with the white whale, and Petaljuice, and again in Pristella, and he thinks about how these are all human lives, rather than evil monsters. They were people he could talk to and understand. He asks Vincent why he kills people, and Vincent simply says that it's the only way. Subaru asks if he really knows that, if he's really even looked for other possibilities. To Vincent, Subaru's complaint sounds like the whining of a mosquito, and he squints at him. It's not that he isn't willing to talk, or that they're not speaking the same language, but there's such a difference in their values that it's hard for them to communicate. Subaru's met people whose values he didn't understand before, but they were witches and sin archbishops, and he could just see them as different beings and not really confront it. Here though, in Wallachia, he's experienced this same difference in values with everyone, with Vincent, with the Sudrak, and with the Imperial soldiers. They're not evil, they don't play with lives, but their outlook on things like war is one he just can't understand. He says he just wants to take Rem home. He knows that from now on, Vincent's battle to retake the throne will begin, and he knows that if this had nothing to do with him, if it was in the pages of a biography, he would be enthusiastic about seeing what happened next. But he has no idea how to be part of a conflict like this in a strange and unknown country. His goal is just to get back to Lagunica. He asks where the nearest town is, and says he'll find his way back from there. Vincent says that won't be an easy path either, and Subaru looks at him and thinks he is lonely. He says that he hasn't thanked him yet for saving Rem. Vincent points out that he saved another one too. Subaru says that saving Louis was superfluous, but also thinks that maybe things would have been more complicated if she'd been lost, so in a way, even that helped. Subaru states his determination not to live like Vincent, but Vincent just replies with, "Neither you nor anyone can take the place of me." And so the scene changes, to Subaru preparing to leave the people of Sudrak and travel to the nearest town in the Budheim jungle. Mizelda accepted Subaru's decision as the choice of her compatriot, and as the chieftain, once she'd agreed to it, there was no questioning it. As he says goodbye to Utakata, who says she's going to fight with the rest of the tribe, he thinks that it's perhaps too sweet an idea to think that children can remain left out of things like violence and war here. He remembers her killing him with a poison arrow. He tells her not to die, and she says she'll do her best. Subaru thinks about what the chances are that Vincent and his small army of maybe 100 Sudrak can win the battles ahead, and he wonders what Vincent's strategies might be. But he's distracted by Rem arriving with her cane and a small amount of luggage, ready to leave with him. Initially, he had expected Rem to stubbornly refuse to leave, and had been prepared to carry her out of the village while she was sleeping, but she'd actually agreed to it straight away. The Sudrak have made a wooden structure that will allow Subaru to carry Rem, who still can't walk properly, so that they can make faster progress. Louis will also be going with them. Subaru thinks about how even if there was a way to persuade Rem to leave her behind, he couldn't leave an unexploded bomb like that with the Sudrak, and he didn't want to take his eyes off of a Sin Archbishop. The Sudrak, who also seem to love Louis, have repaired her clothes, and she's wearing a clean white dress. Subaru says goodbye to Mizelda, who refers to him as her compatriot because he's completed the Bloodlife ritual. She says that they will be fighting for their clan, and he must protect Rem and Louis. He doesn't feel right correcting her about Louis. Subaru, Rem and Louis have been assigned escorts to go with them to the next town, and these will be a green-haired woman named Kuna, who Subaru doesn't know, and Holy, the yellow-haired, chubby Sudrak woman who walked with Subaru before he did the blood life ritual, who was eating some meat on the bone. Subaru lifts the carrier, with Rem saying she's comfortable in it, and the Sudrak gather by the entrance to the village to see them off. In the group, Subaru looks for Vincent's masked face, though he doesn't expect to see it. He's not the type of person to see someone off, and they don't have that type of relationship. And so, when he does see it, he doesn't know what to say. All he can come out with is, "See you." And at the same moment, Louis, who hasn't spoken until now, says, "Wow." And with that, Subaru, Louis, Rem, and their 2 escorts leave the village to escape the war to come. And that's the end of the chapter. The long conversation between Subaru and Vincent goes back to this theme of how different the values of people in Wallachia are. That's come up with just about every character Subaru has met here. And while this is important in his reasons for not wanting to get involved in Vincent's war, I think it's likely to also be intended to highlight the differences in values with Priscilla, who Subaru does already know, and perhaps also with Al too, where he's not Wallachian but has spent a lot of time there. With Subaru now on the move again, I'm not sure whether we'll start to see characters like them starting to appear, but I think it's safe to say from Vincent's words at the end of chapter 12 that while he's letting Subaru leave here, he probably isn't done with including him in his plans in one way or another. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts on this chapter in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.